We want to begin in presenting. We heard from him in the introduction, but now we'll get more information for those who don't know. And because we do have extended bios in the programs, for those who have the programs, if you don't, you're going to get some brief information now. So we're going to begin with Dr. Safi Kaskas. And his title is the title of the Qur'an translation that he's done is called The Qur'an, A Contemporary Understanding. And just to remind everyone, we're getting ready to go into the core of this first session that Dr. Ibrahim Najm begin the authentication process governing published Qur'an translations. And then again, we're going to come with question and answer after the presenters have given their presentations. The title of this presentation from Dr. Safi is Methodology for Qur'an Translation. Now, Dr. Safi, he's the founding president of IQRA. He translated and published the Qur'an into simple, easy, understanding English in January of 2015. And he published the Qur'an with references to the Bible in January 2016. This book that we are speaking about now has 3,000 references to the Old and the New Testaments. He is a senior researcher in Islam and multi-faith reconciliation with George Mason University's Center for World Religions, Diplomacy, and Conflict Resolution. Dr. Kaskas has studied Abrahamic religions and lectured throughout the United States and the Middle East on subjects related to Islam, interfaith, and reconciliation between evangelicals and American Muslims. He is a co-founder of East-West University, Chicago, Illinois, and was elected as president of his board of directors from 1979 to 2005. And he continues to serve on the board as an ex-officio. He is the founding president of Strategic Edge Management Consultants. He helped many mid-level and large corporations successfully develop their business portfolios. Ladies and gentlemen, our dear brothers and sisters, we present to you Dr. Safi Kaskas.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyihi al-amin. Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa 'allimna ma yanfa'una wa zidna 'ilman ila 'ilmina. وأرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه واجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه وأدخلنا برحمتك في عبادك الصالحين. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. The importance of preparing a methodology for a Quran translation project is something I learned from my extensive involvement in my business consultancy, where planning can make a project or break it. I spoke to many Quran translators and found that they're, in fact, very diverse and motivated by different reasons for doing their Quran translations. What is common between them is their desire to make the message of the Quran known to the widest possible audience. Yet, the belief that the Quran is the literal word of Allah is fundamental to all of them. However, this is a frightening notion that haunts many Quran translators. It often drives them to translate the Quran word for word, thinking that this is the best way to maintain faithfulness to the sacred text, despite the fact that they are aware that the translation itself is not sacred. As a result, many of the Quran translations are tarnished by this excessive literalness to a degree that they confuse the reader instead of making the Quran's meaning understandable. Some, in their zeal to spread the word of Allah among the widest audience, make their translation oversimplified. Others think it is safest to go to the understanding of the early commentators and translate their understanding of the text. In fact, they are all starting the translation project from the wrong beginnings. A translation of the Quran is like any other important project, need to start with a plan. What do I mean? I mean, you need to sit down and before you translate one single word, draw a roadmap for your project. Without a plan, you will never know whether you have arrived to your intended destination. So, what is a methodology and why it is important for the Qur'an translator and his audience? A project methodology is usually defined as a system of methods, principles, and rules for managing a project. Hence, defining a methodology is important for the Qur'an translator and his audience for several reasons. It helps the translator be consistent and transparent in his choices and decisions, and to justify them based on sound principles and evidence. It helps the reader to understand the translator's perspective and purpose, and to evaluate the quality and reliability of the translation. It helps to avoid or minimize misunderstanding, confusion, or distortion of the Quranic message, especially when dealing with sensitive or controversial issues. Therefore, defining the methodology is a crucial step for any Qur'an translator who wants to produce a faithful, accurate, and clear rendition of the Quranic text. It is also a useful tool for any reader who wants to gain a comprehensive and balanced understanding of the Quranic meaning. Now, what should a Qur'an translator include in the methodology for his translation? Here are some possible elements that a Qur'an translator should include in his methodology. The purpose and scope of the translation, such as who is the intended audience and what are the limitations or challenges of the translation. All that require research. Discussion of the source and target languages, such as what are the characteristics and features of the Arabic language of the Quran and the language of the translation, and how do they differ or relate to each other? Are the translator's assumptions subjective or objective? The translation principles and strategies, such as what are the criteria and standards for selecting and rendering words, expressions, and structures? And how do they reflect the meaning and style of the Quranic text? All this need to be stated after the necessary research. The translation techniques and tools, such as what are the methods and procedures for analyzing, comparing, and transferring the Quranic text, and what are the resources and references used for consultation and verification. The translation evaluation and revision, such as what are the measures and indicators for assessing the quality and accuracy of the translation, and how are the feedback and suggestions incorporated into the final version. The main goal of defining a methodology is to ensure that the translation is faithful, clear, and consistent with the Quranic text and not based on cultural biases. In short, the methodology plan is basically the assumptions you have for each milestone of your translation, and they may vary from one person to another based on the translator's background, education, experience, and biases. Let me give you an example from my own methodology for my Qur'an translation, which I started by stating the circumstances that led me to do the translation and the goals of the translation. I said, it is only fair to let you know that my Qur'an translation was my response to 9/11. Hence, I started with 3 goals in mind. Number 1, to have a simple, easy to read and understand English translation of the Qur'an's meaning addressed to young Americans with high school education. Number 2, to have a translation that represent a fresh understanding of the original Arabic based on the tools of knowledge presently available. 3, to have a translation that will be a tool of reconciliation rather than emphasizing the differences between Islam and the other Abrahamic religions known as wall building. It will strive to highlight the commonalities, which is bridge building. Here is an example about my translation strategy, talking about my assumptions about the Quranic Arabic and many aspects I assume about the Arabic language. Number 1, the Quran is a text written in classical Arabic language. So the only way we can effectively understand its meaning is through a proficient knowledge of classical Arabic. We base our understanding of Quranic Arabic on the following assumptions. A, the Quranic Arabic as a language is the root of today's Arabic, but far more superior to it. In the Quranic Arabic, the words used are fixed and will not change. But to understand a word, we did not go to the dictionaries or to classical commentators only, but we went through the process of comparing the word in a verse to the same word in other verses. If a traditional commentator explained a certain word in a certain way, and we found that this contradicted the way the Quran used this word in other verses, we opted to use the Quranic understanding. This method is known as understanding the Quran through the Quran. B, the same goes for the tense of verbs used in the Quran. In some verses, God uses the present tense and then switches to future or present continuous tense. We understand that using the same tense is proper English, but tense has to do with time. And time is relative to living on this planet, which is limited to human beings, but not to God. However, we try to use English grammar rules to the best of our ability, as stated above. C, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not use synonyms because he simply doesn't need to. Every word used in the Quran has a specific meaning. Creator is not the same as innovator, nor it is the same as father or programmer. Father in English mean walid and ab, yet we know that they are not the same in Arabic. D, the words and the verses carry important meaning. Let me repeat. The words and the verses carry important meaning. If we understand the meaning of a verse to be inconsequential, then we should conclude that we have misunderstood the meaning. These are but few examples. For complete examination of my methodology, please refer to my book, The Quran, A Contemporary Understanding, and examine the methodology section. In conclusion, it is my view that it is only fair to the audience of any Quran translation that we share with them the assumptions, strategies, and methodology used to produce the translation if we want the reader to understand that our translation is based on what we assume to be fair assumptions. If our assumptions, however, are proven to be faulty, the translation will need to be revised. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for listening.